My daughter-in-law left her 2 sons at my old house, promising to return in 4 hours. She never came back, betraying everyone. 8 years later, she sued me for kidnapping her children, demanding justice. But when I handed the judge a mysterious envelope, he asked, "Do they know what's inside?" I replied, "Not yet." That truth changed everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The wrench slipped from my grip, clattering against the concrete floor of the garage. That sound, gravel crunching under unfamiliar tires, made every muscle in my weathered body tense. I glanced at my watch. 6:30. The boys wouldn't be home from baseball practice for another hour. Through the dusty window, I watched a red sedan emerge from behind the oak trees that lined my driveway. The car moved slowly, deliberately, as if the driver was taking their time to study my property. My farm sat 3 miles from town, isolated enough that unexpected visitors were rare. I straightened up from the old corn cleaner I'd been repairing, my joints protesting after hours bent over the machinery. The sedan pulled to a stop near my front porch, engine ticking as it cooled. Dust settled around the vehicle like a cloud of uncertainty. The driver's door opened and a woman stepped out. My breath caught in my throat. Even from this distance, even after 8 years, I recognized that silhouette. Thinner now, more angular, but unmistakably her. Sarah Miller, or Sarah Hanson as she'd once been, my son's widow, the woman who'd abandoned my grandsons like yesterday's trash. She'd changed. Her dark blonde hair was shorter, dyed a harsher shade that didn't suit her complexion. The clothes she wore, a crisp blue blazer and dark slacks, looked expensive, like she was trying to project respectability. But I could see the nervous energy in her movements, the way her fingers drummed against her car keys. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, visible even at this distance. She looked older than her 42 years, worn down by whatever life she'd chosen over her children. I stepped out of the garage, still gripping the wrench in my right hand. My work boots crunched against the gravel as I moved toward the house, positioning myself between Sarah and my front door. She hadn't seen me yet. Her attention was focused on the windows, searching for glimpses of the boys she'd left behind. "Sarah." My voice carried across the yard, flat and cold. She turned, and for a moment, genuine surprise flickered across her features. Then she composed herself, lifting her chin with a confidence I knew she didn't feel. Her smile was practiced, hollow. "Hello, Glenn." She took a step closer, her heels clicking against the stones. "You look well." I didn't move from my position near the porch steps. My grip on the wrench tightened until my knuckles went white. "What are you doing here?" "I've come back for my children." The words hit me like a physical blow. For 8 years, Tim and Jake had been my boys, my responsibility, my family. I'd raised them from scared little kids into strong young men. I'd taught them to throw a curveball, helped with homework, held them when nightmares woke them crying for parents who couldn't comfort them anymore. "Your children?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "You lost the right to call them that when you walked away." Sarah's practiced composure cracked slightly. "I was sick, Glenn. I needed time to heal." 8 years? I stepped forward, my full height, 6 feet 2 inches of farm-built muscle, casting a shadow over her. 8 years to heal from what? From being their mother? She flinched but held her ground. "You don't understand what I went through after Robert died. The grief, I understand plenty." My words came out sharp, clipped. "I understand that 2 little boys needed their mama, and she chose to run away instead of fighting for them. I'm fighting for them now." Sarah's voice hardened, revealing a steel beneath the nervous exterior. "I'm their mother, Glenn, their legal guardian, and I want them back." The threat in her tone was unmistakable. This wasn't a request. It was a declaration of war. "Get off my property." I raised the wrench slightly, not as a threat, but as emphasis. "Those boys have a home here. They have stability. They don't need you disrupting their lives again." Sarah's smile returned, colder now. "We'll see about that." She turned and walked back to her car with measured steps. "This isn't over, Glenn. Not by a long shot." The red sedan reversed down my driveway, disappearing behind the oak trees as suddenly as it had appeared. I stood alone in my front yard, the wrench trembling in my grip, watching the dust settle where her car had been. The quiet of the countryside returned, birds singing in the distance, wind rustling through the cornfields. But the peace I'd known for 8 years was shattered. Sarah was back, and she wanted my boys. I started walking toward the kitchen door, my legs unsteady beneath me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Inside my kitchen, muscle memory took over while my mind reeled. I filled the coffee pot with water, measured grounds into the filter, pushed the brew button, all automatic movements performed by hands that still shook from the confrontation outside. The familiar ritual couldn't calm the storm in my chest. 8 years. 8 years since she'd vanished like smoke, leaving me to pick up the pieces of 2 broken little hearts. Steam rose from my cup as I sat at the old oak table where my family had shared thousands of meals. Robert's photo smiled at me from the refrigerator door, my boy in his army uniform, proud and strong, never knowing what would come after, what cancer would steal from all of us. The coffee tasted bitter, but I drank it anyway, letting the heat ground me in the present moment. Evening light slanted through the gingham curtains my wife had hung 20 years ago, painting everything golden. This kitchen had seen joy and sorrow in equal measure. I closed my eyes and let myself remember Robert's final days. Spring of 2015, when hope had finally died in that sterile hospital room. My son, my strong, capable boy who could fix any engine and charm any woman, reduced to skin and bones beneath white sheets. Sarah had been there for every visit, holding his hand while machines beeped their electronic lullaby of life support. She'd whispered to him constantly, telling him about the boys' latest adventures, painting pictures of the future they'd planned together. Even as Robert's body failed, she never stopped believing he'd come home. "I can't do this without him, Glenn," she'd whispered to me one night in the hospital corridor, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I don't know how to be their mother alone." I should have seen the warning signs then. The way she flinched when Tim hugged her, as if his touch hurt, how she'd stare at Jake sleeping and start crying for no reason. The boys reminded her of Robert. The same dark hair, the same stubborn chin, the same laugh that could fill a room. After the funeral, Sarah's grief consumed everything. She'd sit in Robert's chair for hours, staring at nothing. The boys would try to show her their drawings or ask for help with homework, and she'd look right through them like they were ghosts. "Grandpa Glenn," 7-year-old Tim had asked me one afternoon, "why doesn't Mama see us anymore?" I'd started spending more time at their house, helping with meals and bedtime routines. Sarah would disappear for hours, driving around the countryside or sitting in Robert's grave. When she returned, she'd smell like alcohol and other things I didn't want to name. The boys began coming to my farm more often, first for afternoons, then overnight stays, then entire weekends. Sarah never objected. If anything, she seemed relieved to have them gone. I understood her pain. Lord knows I'd felt it too when cancer took my boy. But understanding didn't excuse abandonment. Those children needed their mother, not another grieving statue in their house. "I tried everything," Robert had whispered during his last conscious conversation. "Promise me you'll take care of them, Dad. All of them. Sarah too, if you can." I'd made that promise with tears in my eyes, never imagining how impossible it would become. How do you care for someone who doesn't want to be saved? The coffee had gone cold in my hands. I stared at Robert's photo, seeing his young face full of hope and determination. He'd fought the cancer until his last breath, never giving up, never running from the pain. His wife had made a different choice. I set down the cup and rubbed my eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Sarah had made that clear. But tonight, I needed to remember why I'd fought so hard to give Tim and Jake the stability their mother couldn't provide. The sound of gravel in the driveway made me look up. The boys were home from practice, their voices carrying through the screen door as they argued about batting averages. Normal sounds of a normal evening in a house where children felt safe and loved. I pushed back from the table, leaving Robert's photo smiling down at the kitchen where his sons would soon sit for dinner. Some promises were worth keeping, no matter the cost. Robert's face in that photograph blurred as my vision clouded with unshed tears. That promise I'd made to him, to protect his family, all of them, had been tested in ways I never could have imagined. But one night in particular remained seared into my memory like a brand, the night that changed everything forever. 2 years after Robert's death, when the boys had just started to feel secure in their routines, Sarah made her choice. It was past 2 in the morning when car doors slammed outside my house. I'd been asleep in my recliner, the late news flickering silently on the television. The harsh sound jolted me awake, and I immediately knew something was wrong. Through my front window, I saw Sarah's beat-up Honda, weaving slightly as she walked toward my porch. Even in the darkness, her unsteady gait told the whole story. She was drunk again, or worse. I intercepted her before she could reach the front door where my grandson slept. The smell hit me first. Cheap wine mixed with something sharper. Chemical. Her clothes were wrinkled like she'd slept in them, and her eyes held a wild, desperate look I'd never seen before. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" I kept my voice low, conscious of the sleeping children upstairs. "I want to see my boys." She tried to push past me, but I blocked her path with my body. "They're my children, Glenn. You can't keep me from them." "At 2 in the morning? In this condition?" I gestured at her disheveled appearance. "They're asleep. They're safe. Let them be." But our voices had already carried upstairs. Small feet padded across the hardwood floor above us, and moments later, Tim appeared at the top of the stairs, his 7-year-old face pale with confusion. Behind him, little Jake rubbed his eyes, clutching his stuffed elephant. "Grandpa, what's happening?" Tim's voice was small, uncertain. Sarah looked up at her sons, her babies, and something cracked in her expression. Not softness, but something harder. A door slamming shut. "Mama!" Jake called down, hope threading through his sleepy voice. Instead of answering, Sarah turned away from them. "I can't," she whispered to me, her words slurring slightly. "Look at them, Glenn. They have his eyes, his smile. Every time I see them, I see what I lost." The boys crept down a few more steps, drawn by the sound of their mother's voice but staying close to each other. Tim's arm went protectively around his younger brother's shoulders, a gesture that broke my heart, because no 7-year-old should feel responsible for protecting anyone. "Sarah," I tried again, my voice gentler now, "the children need you. They miss you." She laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Need me? Look at them, Glenn. Really look. They're terrified of me. Their own mother, and they're hiding behind you like I'm some kind of monster." I glanced back at the boys, and my heart sank. She was right. Jake was crying silently, and Tim's face showed the kind of wariness that comes from too much unpredictability, too many disappointments. "That's not," I started, but Sarah was already moving past me, heading for the door. "I'm leaving," she announced, her voice gaining strength. "Tonight. For good this time." "Sarah, wait. Don't do this. The boys will be better off without me." She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. "You'll take care of them. You already are. They love you more than they ever loved me anyway." "That's not true, and you know it." But she was gone, the screen door banging shut behind her. I heard her car start, the engine coughing and sputtering as she backed out of my driveway. The boys and I stood frozen in my living room, listening to the sound fade into the distance. The next morning I found the note she'd left on my kitchen counter, handwritten on lined paper, the words shaky but clear. "Glenn, I can't be the mother they deserve. Every day I look at them is another day I fail Robert's memory. Take them, raise them, love them the way I can't anymore. They're yours now. Sarah." I folded that note carefully and put it in my desk drawer, some instinct telling me I might need it someday. Who knew it would come in handy 8 years later? Sitting in my kitchen now, the taste of cold coffee sharp on my tongue, I understood what had really happened tonight. Sarah's return wasn't about maternal love or second chances. It was about something else entirely, something that had nothing to do with being a mother. I stood up from the table, my joints protesting, and carried my cup to the sink. The photo of Robert watched me from the refrigerator, his young face serious now in the evening light. Tomorrow would bring whatever Sarah had planned, but I was ready. I had the truth on my side, and 8 years of proof that those boys belonged here, with me, where they were loved and safe. The sound of Tim's laughter drifted down from upstairs as he helped Jake with homework. Normal sounds in a normal house where children could count on the adults to protect them. Some fights were worth having, no matter how long they took. The weight of that memory pressed down on me as I sat in my kitchen staring at Robert's photograph. But Sarah's abandonment hadn't been the end of the story. It had been the beginning of my own desperate search for answers. 3 weeks after she disappeared, I drove to the Cedar Falls police station. Officer Davis, a man about my son's age, listened patiently as I explained the situation. His uniform was crisp, professional, but his eyes held genuine sympathy. "Mr. Hansen, I understand your concern," he said, leaning forward across his metal desk, "but without signs of violence or coercion, we can only enter her in the missing persons database." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the institutional green walls. I felt out of place in my work clothes, surrounded by filing cabinets and official documents that couldn't capture the reality of two scared boys asking why their mama didn't love them anymore. "She left a note," I offered, "said she couldn't handle being their mother." "That actually supports voluntary departure." Davis's tone remained gentle but firm. "Adults have the right to leave, even if we don't agree with their choices." 2 months later, my frustration with bureaucratic limitations led me to Mike Torres's office in Waterloo. The private investigator operated from a cramped space above a hardware store, his desk cluttered with case files and coffee-stained reports. "Finding people is what I do," Torres said simply, his weathered face serious. "But I need you to understand, sometimes what we find isn't what we want to hear." His rate was $150 per day, plus expenses, a significant sum for a retired farmer, but I had savings, and the boys needed closure, even if they never knew I was searching. "Weekly reports," Torres promised, shaking my hand. "I'll find her, Mr. Hansen. Question is, what do you want to do when I do?" I hadn't known the answer then. 3 weeks into September, Torres called with results. Sarah was living in Denver under her maiden name, working nights at a dive bar called Murphy's Tavern. She'd rented a studio apartment in a rough neighborhood, made no attempt to contact family or friends back home. "She's alive, healthy as far as I can tell," Torres reported over the phone. "Living paycheck to paycheck, but she chose this life. No signs she's being held against her will or prevented from making contact." The information hit me like cold water. Part of me had hoped she was sick, trapped, unable to return. Instead, she'd simply chosen a new life that didn't include her children. "You want me to approach her? Set up a meeting?" Torres asked. I sat silent in my kitchen, watching Tim help Jake with homework at the same table where we sat now. They'd adapted to life without her, found their rhythm in our little family. They still asked about Mama sometimes, but the tears had stopped months ago. "No," I said finally. "End the investigation." "You sure? I could keep monitoring." "If she wanted to come back, she would have come back." The words came out harder than I'd intended. "Send me your final report and close the file." Torres mailed me a manila envelope containing photographs, addresses, employment records. Sarah smiling behind a bar. Sarah walking alone down city streets. Sarah living the life she'd chosen instead of fighting for the one she'd abandoned. I locked that envelope in my desk drawer, next to her farewell note. Now, 8 years later, I understood why I'd kept those documents. Information was power, and Sarah had no idea how much I knew about her choices. She thought she could return with lawyers and demands, believing I'd been sitting here helpless all these years, but I'd never been helpless, just patient. The sound of gravel crunching outside pulled me back to the present. Through the window, I could see the school bus approaching, bringing my boys home from another ordinary day in their secure, stable lives. Some searches end with finding what you're looking for. Others end with accepting what you've already found is better than what you lost. The school bus rounded the bend at exactly 3:45, just as it had every weekday for the past 8 years. I stood at the kitchen counter slicing apples, the knife moving in steady, practiced strokes, while my mind churned with everything I couldn't tell the boys walking up my driveway. Tim's laughter carried through the screen door as he teased Jake about something that had happened during lunch. Normal sounds of normal teenagers coming home to their normal life, a life Sarah wanted to destroy with legal papers and courtroom drama. My hands trembled slightly as I arranged apple slices on their plates. How could I look at them and pretend yesterday hadn't happened? How could I help Jake with his fractions while calculating the odds of losing them both to a woman who'd already proven she didn't want them? The kitchen door banged open, followed by the familiar thud of backpacks hitting the floor. Tim appeared first, his dark hair tousled from baseball practice, followed by Jake with paint stains on his fingers from art class. "Hey, Grandpa," Tim called, already heading for the refrigerator. "Coach says I might make varsity next year if I keep working on my curveball." "That's great, son." The words came automatically while I studied his face, searching for Robert's features, but seeing Sarah's stubborn jaw, her expressive eyes. "Grab some milk to go with these apples." Jake bounced up to the counter, his 13-year-old energy filling the kitchen. "Look what I made." He pulled a crumpled drawing from his backpack, our farmhouse rendered in bright watercolors, with 3 stick figures standing in the front yard. Glenn, Tim, Jake. No one else. "That's beautiful, Jake." My voice caught slightly. "We'll put it on the refrigerator with the others." As they settled at the kitchen table with their snacks, I started preparing dinner. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Comfort food that had sustained us through homework battles and growth spurts. The routine motions calmed my nerves, but I couldn't stop watching them, memorizing these moments in case they were numbered. "Grandpa, you're being weird," Tim observed, pausing with his milk glass halfway to his lips. "You keep staring at us like we're gonna disappear or something." Heat crept up my neck. "Just tired, I guess. Long day." Jake struggled with his math worksheet, eraser shavings scattered across the table. "I don't get these fractions," he whined. "Why do we need to know this stuff anyway?" I pulled up a chair beside him, grateful for the distraction. "Everything builds on everything else," I explained, showing him how to find common denominators. "Like farming, you can't plant corn without preparing the soil first." "You always say that." Jake grinned, but he bent over his homework with renewed focus. Tim finished his algebra quickly and started discussing upcoming baseball tryouts. His words washed over me while I fought the urge to tell him how proud I was, how much I loved them both, how I'd fight anyone who tried to take them away. During dinner, we fell into our familiar rhythm. Tim talked about his friend whose parents were getting divorced, and I had to grip my fork tighter to keep from flinching. Jake showed us his art project again, explaining each detail of his drawing with the intensity only 13-year-olds could muster. "The 3 of us," he pointed to the stick figures. "Our family. Our family. Not theirs, not mine. Ours. We'd built this together through homework struggles and midnight coughs, through little league games and county fair competitions. Sarah had walked away from this, chosen dive bars and loneliness over bedtime stories, and Sunday morning pancakes. "Grandpa, why are you so quiet tonight?" Tim asked again, his teenage radar picking up on my distraction. "Just thinking about some things I need to take care of," I said, which was true enough. "Nothing for you boys to worry about." After dinner, they headed upstairs to finish homework and get ready for bed. Their voices drifted down through the old farmhouse, Tim helping Jake with something, both of them laughing at some shared joke. The sounds of siblings who'd grown up together, protected and loved in this house that had become their sanctuary. I stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes, watching their shadows move past the upstairs windows. 8 years of this routine, 8 years of building something solid and secure from the wreckage Sarah had left behind. How could I tell them their mother wanted to destroy it all? The weight of the secret pressed down on my shoulders as I dried the last plate and put it away. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I'd let them sleep peacefully in their beds, believing they were safe in the only home they remembered. Some truths were too heavy for children to carry, no matter how grown up they seemed. A week later, I was replacing a broken fence post in the front yard when Jim Patterson's mail truck approached an hour earlier than usual. Something about the way he drove, slower, more deliberate, made me straighten up from my work and wipe the sweat from my forehead. Jim had been delivering mail to my farm for 15 years. He knew my routine, knew I preferred my letters left in the box rather than brought to the door. But today he parked at the end of my driveway and walked toward me, carrying a manila envelope that required my signature. "Morning, Glenn." His weathered face looked uncomfortable. "Got some certified mail for you. Official-looking stuff." My stomach dropped as I signed the receipt with hands that had been steady moments before. The envelope bore the letterhead of a law firm in Des Moines, Garrett, Williams, and Associates. Nothing good ever came in packages that required signatures. "Thanks, Jim." I forced my voice to remain casual. "Probably just some insurance paperwork." but we both knew it wasn't insurance paperwork. Inside my kitchen, I opened the envelope with a paring knife, my hands growing steadier as anger replaced dread. The legal documents were thick, official, full of language designed to intimidate someone who'd never faced a courtroom battle. The state of Iowa, Family Court Division, Sarah Miller versus Glenn Hansen regarding unlawful detention of minors Timothy and Jacob Hansen. Unlawful detention. As if loving those boys, raising them, giving them stability and security was somehow criminal. As if 8 years of being their father in everything but biology was a crime against the woman who'd abandoned them like unwanted pets. I read the charges 3 times, each reading stoking my fury. Sarah accused me of preventing her from seeing her children, of custodial interference, of denying her parental rights. The woman who'd written a note saying she couldn't be their mother was now claiming I'd stolen that chance from her. The phone rang exactly 10 minutes after Jim's truck had disappeared down my driveway. Sarah's timing was precise, calculated. She'd known exactly when I'd received those papers. "Did you get the documents?" Her voice was cold, businesslike, nothing like the broken woman who'd stumbled into my yard that night 8 years ago. "Sarah, you've completely lost your mind." My grip tightened on the receiver. "Unlawful detention? Those boys have been with me because you abandoned them. I was sick, Glenn, grieving, and you took advantage of that to steal my children." "Steal?" The word exploded out of me. "I saved them. I gave them a home when their mother decided bars were more important than bedtimes. Meet me today, 3 o'clock, Diner's Corner." Her tone brooked no argument. "We can settle this quietly, or we can let the courts decide. Your choice." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone for a moment, and then carefully hung it up. Sarah's choice of meeting place was strategic. The diner was public, neutral, full of potential witnesses. She'd thought this through, planned every detail. I looked around my kitchen, seeing 8 years of family life in every corner. Tim's baseball trophies on the windowsill, Jake's artwork covering the refrigerator, homework still scattered on the table from last night's algebra session. This wasn't desperation driving Sarah's return. This was calculation. Someone had advised her, coached her, given her the language and strategy to launch this legal assault. She wasn't the broken woman who'd left that note in 2017. This was someone who'd had time to prepare, to gather resources, to plan her attack. I checked the clock, 11:15. The boys wouldn't be home from school for hours, which meant I had time to drive into town and face whatever Sarah had planned for our confrontation at Diner's Corner. Changing into clean clothes, I caught sight of myself in the bedroom mirror. 68 years old, weathered by farm work and worry, but still strong enough to fight for what mattered. Sarah might have lawyers and legal papers, but I had something more powerful, the truth. And I had that note she'd written 8 years ago, the one where she'd voluntarily given up her children because she couldn't handle being their mother. She had no idea I'd kept it, no idea what kind of evidence she'd left behind in her moment of honest desperation. Let her bring her lawyers and her calculated tears. I'd been raising her children while she played at being free. Now she'd learn what it cost to walk away from family. The legal papers lay on my kitchen counter like a declaration of war. Fine. If Sarah wanted a war, she'd get one. But she'd discover that a man fighting for his children, even if they weren't legally his, was more dangerous than she'd calculated. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Time to find out what Sarah really wanted and what I'd have to do to keep my boys safe. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the gravel parking lot of Diner's Corner, my truck's engine ticking as it cooled in the afternoon heat. Through the large windows, I could see the familiar red vinyl booths and checkered floor that had hosted countless town meetings, birthday celebrations, and everyday conversations over the decades. I chose a table near the window with clear sightlines to both entrances, old farm instincts that served me well in situations requiring vigilance. Betty Morrison approached with her customary smile, but I caught the worry in her eyes as she poured coffee without being asked. "Rough day, Glenn?" she asked quietly, her weathered hands steady despite the tension radiating from our interaction. "Could be better," I admitted, wrapping my fingers around the warm ceramic mug. "Could be a lot worse, too." Sarah entered exactly at 3 o'clock, and I barely recognized the woman walking toward my table. Gone was the desperate, broken creature who'd stumbled into my yard. This Sarah wore a black business suit that screamed expensive lawyer consultations, her hair professionally styled, makeup applied with precision. She moved with calculated confidence, surveying the cafe's occupants before sliding into the seat across from me. "You look tired, Glenn," she began, her voice carrying a sweetness that felt like poison. 8 years of raising other people's children must be exhausting. The insult landed exactly as she'd intended, but I'd spent decades dealing with difficult animals and unpredictable weather. Patience was a farmer's greatest tool. "They're not other people's children, Sarah. They're your children, Robert's children, my grandchildren." Biologically speaking, yes. She stirred sugar into her coffee with deliberate motions. But legally, that's about to change. Betty refilled our cups, her movements sharp with disapproval. Everyone in town knew our history, knew how Sarah had vanished, while I'd stepped up to raise Tim and Jake. In a community this size, secrets didn't exist, only varying degrees of polite silence. "Let me cut through the pretense," Sarah continued, leaning forward with predatory intensity. "I want $500,000, Glenn. Cash. Transfer it to an account I'll specify, and I disappear again. Permanently this time." The number hit me like cold water. $500,000. More money than most farmers saw in a lifetime, even successful ones. "And if I refuse? Then I take the boys." Her smile never wavered. "I've got witnesses prepared to testify about your isolation, your age, your inability to provide proper care for growing teenagers. Courts favor mothers, especially mothers who've overcome personal struggles, to reclaim their children." I studied her face, seeing past the makeup and professional styling to the desperation underneath. This wasn't about maternal love or second chances. This was about financial survival. Someone or something had her backed into a corner, and she'd decided to use my grandsons as leverage to escape. "Where were you when Tim broke his leg sliding into home plate?" I asked quietly. "When Jake had pneumonia that kept him in the hospital for a week? When they asked why their mama didn't love them anymore?" "I was sick," she replied without emotion, "grieving, processing trauma. The court will understand that I needed time to heal before I could be the mother they deserved." 8 years of healing, however long it took? Sarah checked her watch, another calculated gesture. "You have 48 hours to decide, Glenn. Money or children. Those are your options." She stood and placed a $20 bill on the table, enough to cover both our coffees with a generous tip. Even her payment was strategic, demonstrating financial capability to anyone watching. "Sarah," I called as she reached the door, "what happened to you? Where did the woman who loved Robert go?" For just a moment her mask slipped. Something raw and broken flickered across her features before the professional composure returned. "She died with him," Sarah said simply. "What's left is what you see." The door chimed as she left, her heels clicking against the sidewalk as she walked to her red sedan. I remained at the table, watching her drive away while Betty hovered nearby with maternal concern. "Glenn, honey, are you all right?" "I will be," I said, standing and leaving my own payment. "One way or another, I will be." The drive home gave me time to process what I'd learned. This wasn't about custody or children's welfare. It was extortion dressed up in legal language. Sarah had calculated that my love for the boys would override my common sense, that I'd pay any price to avoid a court battle. She'd miscalculated in one crucial area. She assumed I'd been passive these past 8 years, simply accepting her abandonment without documentation or preparation. But farmers learn to plan for bad weather, failed crops, and unexpected disasters. I had something Sarah didn't know about, something that could change everything. That evening, I found Tim and Jake sprawled across our living room sofa, arguing over television channels with the casual intensity only siblings could manage. The late sun streamed through windows that framed the life we'd built together. Tim's baseball trophies on the mantel, Jake's artwork covering one wall, family photos documenting 8 years of birthdays, holidays, and ordinary moments that had become precious beyond measure. I reached for the remote and clicked off the television. Both boys looked up with the startled attention children give when routine suddenly shifts. "We need to talk," I said, settling on the coffee table facing them. "Both of you. It's important." Tim straightened immediately, his 15-year-old instincts recognizing serious adult business. Jake's expression shifted from curiosity to concern as he registered the gravity in my voice. "Boys, I need to tell you something I should have mentioned earlier." I took a deep breath, knowing these words would change their sense of security forever. "Your mother has come back. She wants to take you away from here." The silence that followed felt heavy as summer air before a thunderstorm. Tim's face hardened with understanding, while Jake's eyes widened with a mixture of confusion and possibility. "Mom's back," Jake whispered. "She wants to see us." "She wants more than that," I explained carefully. "She's filed papers with the court claiming I've kept you from her illegally. She wants custody, wants you to come live with her." Tim's reaction was immediate and fierce. "Like heck she does," he said, his voice carrying an anger I'd rarely heard from him. "She walked out on us, Grandpa. She chose to leave." "I know, son. I know exactly what happened." I pulled out my phone and showed them a recent photo I'd taken of Sarah in the caf earlier. "This is her now. Do you remember her?" Jake studied the picture with the intensity of someone trying to match a face to fragmented memories. "Maybe. Sort of." His voice held uncertainty mixed with longing. "She looks different than I remember." "You were only 5 when she left," I reminded him gently. "Tim, you remember more." "I remember her crying all the time," Tim said flatly. "I remember her leaving us with you more and more often. I remember the night she packed her bags and drove away without saying goodbye." We moved to the kitchen table for this conversation, the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals, completed homework assignments, and talked through problems both large and small. The familiar setting provided stability for what was about to be a difficult discussion. "She can't just come back and take us," Jake said, his voice gaining strength. "This is our home. You're our family." "The law sees things differently," I explained. "Mothers have certain rights, even when they've been absent. But I want you both to know something. I will fight for you. I'll fight with everything I have to keep you here where you belong." Tim leaned forward, his young face serious beyond his years. "What kind of fight? Like court and lawyers and stuff?" "Exactly like that. And it might get messy. She might say things about me, about our life here, that aren't true. Are you prepared for that?" "Let her try," Tim said with fierce loyalty. "Everyone knows how much you've done for us. Everyone knows she's the one who ran away." Jake's response was quieter, but equally determined. "Grandpa, can I ask you something? If she wants to see us, could we maybe meet her? Just once, but still live here with you?" The question broke my heart with its innocence. Jake's natural curiosity about his missing mother warred with his deep attachment to the only stable home he remembered. "We might not have a choice about meeting her," I said honestly. "If this goes to court, you might have to see her there. But where you live, who takes care of you? That's what we're fighting for." "I'm not going anywhere," Tim declared with finality. "I don't care what some judge says. This is my home. You're my family. She gave up the right to make decisions about my life when she abandoned us." Jake nodded slowly, his decision forming. "I want to stay too. Even if I see her, even if she's nice, I want to live here with you and Tim. We're a family." The relief that washed over me was so powerful I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. For 8 years I'd worried that one day they might choose their biological mother over the grandfather who'd raised them. Their clear, immediate loyalty felt like the greatest gift I'd ever received. "Then we'll fight together," I promised them, all 3 of us, whatever it takes to keep our family together. Tim reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We've got your back, Grandpa, just like you've always had ours." As they headed upstairs for their evening routines, calling good nights and making plans for tomorrow's baseball practice, I sat alone at our kitchen table, feeling something I hadn't experienced since this whole ordeal began. Hope. Sarah had made one critical miscalculation in her strategy. She'd assumed that children who barely remembered her would be eager to return to a mother they'd idealized in her absence. Instead, she'd be fighting for custody of 2 young men who'd already chosen their side. The next morning, I dropped Tim and Jake at school, with reassurances that everything would work out fine, then drove downtown to the professional building that housed Emily Carter's law office. Her secretary, a efficient woman named Margaret, led me through a corridor lined with diplomas and legal certificates into an office that radiated competence and experience. Emily Carter looked exactly like what I'd hoped for. A woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes and a handshake that suggested she wasn't intimidated by courtroom battles. Her desk was organized chaos: law books, case files, and legal pads covered with notes that spoke of a mind constantly at work. "Mr. Hanson," she began, settling behind her desk after pouring coffee from a pot that had clearly seen constant use. "I've reviewed the documents you sent over. These are serious accusations Sarah Miller has made. If we lose this case, the court could order immediate removal of the children from your custody." The words hit me like cold water, but I'd expected nothing less. "Ms. Carter, what I need you to understand is that every accusation she's made is either a lie or a distortion. I've got 8 years of proof that those boys belong with me." "Tell me everything," she said, pulling out a yellow legal pad. "From the beginning. Don't leave out anything, no matter how small it seems." For the next hour, I walked her through our family's entire history: Robert's cancer and death in 2015, Sarah's spiral into grief and irresponsibility, the night she abandoned the children at my house, my decision to hire a private detective to locate her in Denver, the boys' adjustment, and thriving in my care. Emily's pen moved constantly across her pad, occasionally stopping to ask clarifying questions that demonstrated both legal knowledge and practical understanding of family dynamics. Her current demands for custody, I concluded, aren't about wanting to be a mother. She offered me a deal yesterday: $500,000 to disappear permanently. This is extortion disguised as parental concern. "Extortion?" Emily's eyebrows rose sharply. "Did you record this conversation?" "No, but it took place at Diner's Corner with witnesses present. Betty Morrison served us coffee and heard at least part of the discussion." "That's helpful, but not definitive." Emily tapped her pen against her lips, thinking. "What we really need is documentary evidence of abandonment. Letters, emails, anything that shows she voluntarily relinquished custody." I reached for my wallet, extracting the carefully preserved piece of paper I'd carried for 8 years. "Would this help?" Emily unfolded the note, her expression growing more interested with each word she read. Sarah's handwriting was clear and unmistakable. "Glenn, I can't be the mother they deserve. Every day I look at them is another day I fail Robert's memory. Take them. Raise them. Love them the way I can't anymore. They're yours now, Sarah." "My word," Emily breathed, setting the note down carefully. "Mr. Hanson, this could be the key to our entire defense. This is voluntary abandonment in the biological mother's own handwriting. Where did you get this?" "She left it on my kitchen counter the morning after she packed her bags and drove away, 8 years ago." I watched Emily examine the paper, seeing hope building in her professional assessment. "I kept it because, well, maybe I knew this day might come. Maybe I couldn't bring myself to throw away the last honest thing she ever said to me." "Have you told anyone else about this note?" "Nobody. Not even the boys know it exists." Emily made several more notes, her energy visibly increasing as she grasped the legal implications. "This changes everything, Mr. Hanson. With this evidence, plus witness testimony about her 8-year absence, plus the children's clear preference to remain with you, we have a very strong case. What do we need to do? First, we'll need character witnesses from your community: teachers, neighbors, anyone who can testify to your care of the children and Sarah's absence. Second, we'll document the children's wishes formally. At ages 13 and 15, their preferences carry significant weight with the court. And the note? We'll have it authenticated by a handwriting expert and entered as evidence. Unless Sarah can prove this is a forgery, which she can't. This demonstrates clear, voluntary abandonment of parental responsibilities." For the first time since Sarah had appeared in my driveway, I felt like we had a real chance of winning. Emily's confidence was infectious, her strategy sound, her experience evident in every question she asked. "There's one more thing," Emily said, leaning forward intently. "Sarah's attorney will likely try to paint you as an elderly man, unable to care for teenagers. We need to demonstrate your physical health, mental acuity, and continued ability to provide appropriate guardianship." "I can handle that," I said. 68 isn't that old when you've been working farms your whole life." "Excellent." Emily stood and extended her hand. Mr. Hanson, I'm going to do everything in my power to keep your family together. Sarah Miller made a choice 8 years ago, and she wrote it down in her own words. Now she's going to live with the consequences. Walking out of Emily's office into the bright morning sunlight, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Genuine optimism. Sarah might have lawyers and strategy, but I had something more powerful, the truth, documented in her own handwriting. She had no idea what was coming. The week before, our court hearing passed in a blur of preparation that reminded me of harvest season. Methodical, purposeful work, with everything depending on the outcome. Emily had given me a list of people to contact, witnesses who could testify to my character and the children's well-being under my care. Mrs. Evelyn Parker was my first stop. At 73, my next-door neighbor had watched Tim and Jake grow from traumatized little boys into confident young men. She welcomed me into her kitchen with coffee and homemade cookies, her weathered hands steady as she poured. "Glenn, I've been waiting for this conversation for 8 years," she said, settling into her favorite chair by the window that overlooked my property. "I watched you become both father and mother to those children. I saw you at every school event, every sports game, every time they needed medical attention." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "When Jake had pneumonia that winter, you sat up with him 3 nights straight. When Tim broke his arm, you were at the hospital faster than any ambulance. That woman?" She shook her head firmly. "She was a ghost long before she disappeared completely." Next, I drove to Cedar Falls Elementary to meet with Mr. David Lee, who taught both boys and watched them flourish, despite their early trauma. His office walls were covered with student artwork and achievement certificates, including several with the Hanson name. "Your grandsons are remarkable young men," he told me, pulling their academic files from his desk drawer. "When they first came to live with you permanently, Tim was withdrawn, aggressive. Jake had nightmares that affected his classroom attention. But look at these records. Steady improvement, honor roll achievements, positive social interactions." He leaned forward, his teacher's instincts evident in every word. "Glenn, I've seen children from broken homes. These boys aren't broken. They're thriving because you gave them exactly what they needed: stability, consistency, and unconditional love." Dr. Williams at the Family Medical Clinic provided 8 years of health records documenting my responsible guardianship. Regular checkups, prompt treatment of illnesses, dental care, vaccinations, all the mundane details of raising children that Sarah had abandoned along with everything else. "Mr. Hanson," Dr. Williams said, reviewing the thick files, "these children have received excellent care under your guardianship. Their physical and emotional development has been completely normal, even exemplary considering their early trauma. I'll gladly testify to that effect." But as I drove through town gathering support, I noticed unfamiliar cars parked at the Cedar Falls Motel, city license plates, people in business suits who clearly weren't local. Sarah was importing her own witnesses, preparing her own version of events for the courtroom. That evening, Emily called with the court schedule confirmation. 9 o'clock sharp tomorrow morning," she said. "Are you ready for this, Glenn?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, touching the envelope in my jacket pocket, Sarah's handwritten note that would end this battle once and for all. "Emily, do you really think that note will be enough? Combined with everything else? Your community support, the children's clear preferences, 8 years of documented care." Her voice carried professional confidence mixed with personal conviction. "Glenn, truth has power. Tomorrow, we're going to prove that love and sacrifice matter more than biology and legal technicalities." I hung up the phone and walked through my quiet house, seeing evidence of family life in every corner. Tim's baseball glove on the kitchen counter, Jake's latest artwork covering the refrigerator, school photos documenting their growth from scared little boys to confident teenagers who knew they were loved. Tomorrow, I'd walk into that courtroom carrying 8 years of proof that home wasn't about blood. It was about showing up every day, no matter how hard things got. Sarah had chosen to run. I'd chosen to stay. Now we'd let the judge decide which choice had served the children better. The familiar weight of Robert's photo smiled at me from the mantel as I turned off the lights. I'd kept my promise to him. Whatever happened tomorrow, I'd fought for his boys with everything I had. The Cedar Falls County Courthouse stood like a monument to justice on Main Street, its limestone facade weathered by decades of Iowa storms, but still projecting authority. Emily and I arrived 15 minutes early, climbing the steps past protesters, not many but enough local supporters that I felt the community's strength behind me. Inside the courtroom, wooden benches filled quickly with familiar faces. Betty Morrison from the diner, Mrs. Parker from next door, Mr. Lee from the school, Dr. Williams, people who'd watched me raise Tim and Jake, who knew the truth of our life together. Sarah entered at exactly 9 o'clock with a man in an expensive suit, her attorney from Des Moines, all polish and city confidence. She'd chosen her outfit carefully. Conservative navy blue, minimal makeup, the picture of maternal respectability. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes avoided mine as she took her seat at the plaintiff's table. Judge Harlan Brooks entered with the gravity his position demanded. 62 years old, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that commanded immediate respect. I'd seen him at community events over the years, a fair man, but not one easily swayed by emotion over evidence. "Court is now in session," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of decades on the bench. "Case number 2025 FC 147, Miller versus Hansen regarding custody of minor children, Timothy and Jacob Hansen." Sarah's attorney, a man named Richards, who clearly charged by the hour, stood to present his opening statement. His voice carried the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to winning through preparation and presentation, rather than truth. "Your Honor, this case centers on a fundamental principle, a mother's sacred right to her children. My client, Sarah Miller, suffered a temporary mental health crisis following her husband's tragic death from cancer. During her period of grief and recovery, the defendant unlawfully prevented her from maintaining contact with her biological children. I felt Emily's hand touch my arm, steadying me as Richards continued his carefully crafted narrative that bore no resemblance to the reality I'd lived. Ms. Miller has undergone extensive therapy, maintained stable employment, and rebuilt her life. She now seeks to reclaim her proper role as mother to children who have been denied her love through no fault of her own. When Sarah took the witness stand, her performance was flawless. She spoke of overwhelming grief, of needing time to heal before she could be the mother her children deserved. Her voice broke at calculated moments. Her eyes glistened with tears that seemed genuine to anyone who hadn't lived through her abandonment. "I never intended to be away permanently," she testified, looking directly at Judge Brooks with practiced sincerity. "I was receiving treatment, working to become the mother Tim and Jake needed. Mr. Hansen refused my attempts to maintain contact, claiming he was protecting the children from my illness. The lies came so smoothly, I almost admired the performance. Almost. Her imported witnesses took the stand one by one. A therapist from Denver who'd seen her twice, a supervisor who vouched for her employment stability, a neighbor who claimed she'd often spoken lovingly of her children, professional references with limited knowledge, carefully coached testimony designed to paint a picture of rehabilitation and maternal longing. Emily's cross-examination was surgical, revealing the shallow relationships and limited time frames these witnesses represented. But Richards had done his job well, creating reasonable doubt about Sarah's abandonment, while positioning me as the aging grandfather who'd overstepped his bounds. During the lunch recess, Emily and I stepped outside where my supporters had gathered. Their presence reminded me that truth had witnesses too. Not polished professionals from the city, but people who'd watched me raise 2 boys with love and sacrifice. "How do you think it's going?" I asked Emily as we walked back toward the courthouse. "She's good," Emily admitted. "Coached, prepared, playing the victim card perfectly. But Glenn?" She smiled with quiet confidence. "She has no idea what's coming this afternoon." I touched the envelope in my jacket pocket, feeling 8 years of vindication waiting in Sarah's own handwritten words. Let her perform. Let her cry, practice tears, and speak of rights and recovery. I had something more powerful than her polished lies. The truth, preserved in her own desperate handwriting from the night she chose to run, rather than fight for her children. When court reconvened at 2 o'clock, I walked to the witness stand with the same steady calm I'd carried through 8 years of single parenthood. The courtroom felt different now, expectant, as if everyone sensed we'd reached the moment when truth would finally confront lies. Emily approached the witness box with professional confidence, her questions designed to let me tell our story in my own words. Mr. Hansen, please tell the court about your relationship with Timothy and Jacob over the past 8 years. I looked out at the packed courtroom, seeing faces that had watched me become a father for the second time in my life. Your Honor, those boys have been my sons in every way that matters. I've attended every parent-teacher conference, every baseball game, every school play. I've sat up nights when they were sick, helped with homework, taught them to drive. I didn't choose this responsibility. It chose me when their mother walked away. Sarah's attorney objected to my characterization, but Judge Brooks allowed me to continue. When Tim broke his leg sliding into home plate, I was the one who carried him to the emergency room. When Jake had nightmares about why his mama didn't love him anymore, I was the one who held him until he could sleep. For 8 years, I've been the parent who showed up. Emily nodded, moving closer to the critical moment. Mr. Hansen, you've heard testimony that you prevented Ms. Miller from maintaining contact with her children. Is that true? No, ma'am, it is not. I reached into my jacket pocket, feeling the envelope that had waited 8 years for this moment. Your Honor, if I may, I have something that might clarify exactly why Ms. Miller had no contact with her children. Judge Brooks leaned forward, his attention sharpening. What kind of evidence, Mr. Hansen? A note, Your Honor, written by Sarah Miller herself on the night she abandoned Tim and Jake. I held up the aged envelope, its edges worn from 8 years in my wallet. She left this on my kitchen counter, along with packed bags and 2 sleeping children who woke up the next morning asking where their mama had gone. The courtroom fell silent. Sarah's face had gone pale, her eyes fixed on the envelope she'd forgotten existed. Her attorney was on his feet immediately. Objection, Your Honor. This alleged document hasn't been properly authenticated, or... I'll allow it, Judge Brooks said firmly. Mr. Hansen, may I examine this evidence? I walked to the bench and handed him the envelope, watching as he carefully removed the handwritten note. His expression remained professional, but I caught the slight widening of his eyes as he read Sarah's words. Ms. Miller, the judge said, his voice cutting through the courtroom's tension. Do you recognize this handwriting? Sarah's composed mask was cracking. Your Honor, I was not in my right mind when I wrote that. I was grieving, sick, not responsible for... Ms. Miller, please answer the question. Is this your handwriting? Yes, but... Judge Brooks raised his hand for silence, then read the note aloud for the court record. Glenn, I can't be the mother they deserve. Every day I look at them is another day I fail Robert's memory. Take them. Raise them. Love them the way I can't anymore. They're yours now, Sarah. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Sarah was on her feet, tears streaming down her face, but these weren't the calculated tears from her earlier performance. These were the desperate sobs of someone watching 8 years of lies collapse around her. Your Honor, I was sick. That note doesn't represent my true feelings. I've changed. I've grown. I deserve another chance. But Judge Brooks was studying the note with the methodical attention of someone who'd spent decades separating truth from manipulation. Ms. Miller, he said quietly, this note, in your own handwriting, constitutes voluntary abandonment of parental rights. You didn't temporarily step away for treatment. You permanently relinquished custody to Mr. Hansen. The fact that you now regret that decision doesn't invalidate its legal implications. Sarah's attorney made desperate arguments about mental competency and temporary incapacity, but the damage was done. The note was authentic, the abandonment voluntary, and the 8-year silence that followed spoke louder than any coached testimony about rehabilitation. When Judge Brooks delivered his ruling 20 minutes later, his words carried the weight of legal precedent and moral clarity. The court finds that Ms. Miller voluntarily abandoned her parental rights through written declaration and 8 years of complete absence from her children's lives. Mr. Hansen will retain full custody of Timothy and Jacob Hansen, with no visitation rights granted to the biological mother. As the courtroom cleared, I remained seated for a moment, watching Sarah leave with her defeated attorney. Part of me felt sorry for her, the broken woman who'd never recovered from losing the love of her life. But a larger part felt the deep satisfaction of justice served. Emily gathered her papers, professional pride evident in her efficient movements. Glenn, that note was the key to everything. Why did you keep it all these years? I thought about her question as we walked toward the courthouse steps where my community waited. Maybe I knew this day would come. Maybe I just couldn't throw away the last honest thing she ever said to me. Outside, Tim and Jake were waiting with Mrs. Parker and the other supporters. They'd been excused from school to hear the verdict, and their faces showed the relief of children who finally knew they were safe. "Grandpa," Tim said, his 15-year-old voice steady with maturity beyond his years, "is it over?" "It's over," I confirmed, putting my arms around both boys. "We're going home. We're staying together. We're family." As we walked down the courthouse steps toward our truck, Jake looked up at me with the kind of trust that 8 years of love had built. "Grandpa, did our mom really not want us?" It was the question I dreaded, but the answer came easily because it was true. "Your mom was hurting, Jake. Sometimes when people hurt that badly, they can't see past their pain to love what's right in front of them. But that was her choice, not your fault. Never your fault." The drive home took us past fields where corn was starting to show green shoots, new life emerging from good soil, tended by hands that understood the patience required for growth. Just like raising children, I thought, just like building a family from love and commitment rather than biology and obligation. Some battles are worth fighting. Some promises are worth keeping. Some families are worth everything. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.